Women are more popular than men as candidates. That's the evidence from a brand new poll that we commissioned with our partners at Morning Consult. We looked at a lot of different things about the gender issue in politics. We want to know what you think too, and this discussion is meant to combine what we learned from scientific research as well as your comments along here. So leave some comments. We're going to get to you guys in a quick sec. But one of the biggest takeaways from me from this poll was that we asked people to rate female politicians and male politicians, and female politicians came out higher. So the big question, is America ready for a female president, for more female leaders? The answer seems to be yes. They actually like female candidates. I'm joined here by Carole from Women Creating Change, a great nonprofit here in the New York City area. Carole, what was your first reaction to this poll?
I think it's really exciting. To your question about are people ready, the answer is clearly yes. You start to see women, there are women governors, obviously a lot of women mayors. We're seeing, certainly in the most recent election, a lot of women in Congress. We have 2 of our top 6 candidates out there are women, and they're viable women. So people just generally are excited about some of our women candidates out there.
Cool. Now, I'm going to be checking your comments as we have this conversation. I also want to encourage you to interact with us. I'm Noah Pransky. This is Carole with Women Creating Change, and you can, of course, find all of our great work at NBCLX. So another big finding from this poll was we asked, what are the biggest barriers to women running for office? So as much as women were popular, as much as a lot of America thought that women were great on certain issues, and we'll get into some of that in a minute, the biggest thing seems to be this one self-fulfilling prophecy that still seems to be in the way of women reaching that highest level, whether it's governor or president. And that's the question, is America ready for another female leader? And literally the question itself is what's getting in the way, we learned.
I think that's right. I think even the fact that we're asking that question almost leads people to an answer that maybe isn't the right answer. But what you can see is women are getting elected. And the more that we see women in these roles, from very local roles on community boards and on their city councils and on their school boards, all the way through eventually a president, the more that we see them in those roles, the more likely we'll see the success that they have, the challenges that they have, and hopefully see more candidates running.
So one of the things that we asked in our poll is, how do you think women and men fare on different issues? And, we hear time and time again, the number one thing to a lot of voters is healthcare. Our poll, 2,200 people conducted online last week by Morning Consult in LX, is that we found that healthcare, women had a huge advantage over men. Now, a lot of America says that women and men are just the same, but those who thought that one gender was better than the other, women had a huge advantage on things like healthcare, education, and climate change. So younger voters especially were even more so in favor of their female politicians. Men, on the other hand, had advantages on gun policy, national security, and a little bit of an advantage on jobs and economy. What does that tell us?
I know. Well, I'm excited to see that women are faring well in some of the categories, right? What I think I'm finding challenges with is that these, again, fit into stereotypes. When you think about the economy or national security, maybe people are thinking about men more in those roles, or gun policy, these are more masculine, male-oriented, this is where men have the talent. We don't think it really breaks down that way. I think we still have a lot of barriers to really cut through. I was excited, of course, to see women faring really well on education, but it shouldn't be to say that men wouldn't be good on education. They certainly can be. I worked for the U.S. Secretary of Education at the Department of Education, Dick Riley, former governor of South Carolina. He was amazing on education, but so was our Deputy Secretary, former governor of Vermont, Madeline Kunin, first female governor of Vermont. So, there's some great examples of men and women doing great on both sides of the gender roles.
We've seen a huge gain for women in Congress in the last few years. I believe we're up to 25% now between the House and the Senate. We don't have as many governors. It's those executive roles, obviously 0 female presidents. We only have 9 out of 50 female governors. So it's those executive roles that tend to be especially difficult. And again, it's that barrier of, are we ready? So all the underlying data that we got from this poll shows that, yeah, Americans are totally willing, if not anxious, for a female leader, yet it's the lingering doubt. I want to call it the bias loop, right? The more you ask it, the more it creates it. So it's almost like this poll says time to stop.
Stop asking it.
I think once and for all, this poll shows stop asking the question.
Right. And part of the breakdown on that, and I think you had some data on this as well, and it's certainly out there in media, is the difference where women are seen as great collaborators, but they're not necessarily seen as the leader, right? So there's somewhat of a disconnect, because of course we want leaders who are great collaborators, and probably more than ever we need leaders who are great collaborators. We've seen what's happened in Congress, and nobody benefits from the fact that people aren't collaborating. So putting women in those roles with their great collaboration skills, again, not to say men don't have those skills, they do too, but women are seen for having those skills. I think what we'll see is women as great leaders and collaborators.
Yeah, when we asked the poll, leader versus collaborator, 3-1, America said women make better collaborators, like a congressional job, versus the executive in chief, whether it's governor or president. And I think that also trickles over to the corporate world too. I mean, and that's something that your group is very involved in.
Yeah. So one of the big challenges is, you know, we don't see a lot of women in the boardroom. We don't see a lot of women sitting in that CEO office. In New York City, I think we have one CEO in a Fortune 100 company. I mean, that's remarkable in today's day and age that women aren't making it into that room. I love what California did in sort of mandating women on boards, and I think we all could learn a lot from that, and hopefully they'll have some great results from having women sit around that board table. What we do know is diversity in every way adds to the solution. We want to have as much representation. And what my organization, Women Creating Change, is doing is we're working on the pipeline from the ground up. It's really all about civic engagement, making sure women are part of that process, especially our underserved women who haven't been part of the process, really sit at the table, whether it's a school board table, a city council conversation, testifying at a hearing, to getting on their community boards, eventually running for office. We want to make sure that pipeline is as wide as possible.
And one of the things that we discussed in the story that went along with this poll, you can check it out, the link is included in this post, is that women supporting other women, and even men too. I think there's a huge role to support female leaders, someone who you see rising up the ranks, encourage them. There is no perfect time, there's no perfect conversation to go and take that jump, but you have to take it. Men are showing a willingness to take that jump and put things aside temporarily or whatever to climb that ladder. And women need to sometimes have that encouragement to do it as well.
No, and you make a couple great points there. One is women aren't always the best advocates and supporters of other women. So really trying to find a way that women can support, mentor, advise, guide, provide feedback every step of the way. And we have to do that with our younger women. We have to do it with our older women. We just have to do it with each other. But I also love the other point, which is men as allies to women are incredibly important. Men very often today are certainly still in those leadership roles. So they become such an important asset and ally to us in terms of our growth and expectation. And the final point I would make is women have to believe in themselves. I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes it's just a confidence issue. If you haven't been in those roles, you're taking on new responsibilities, you're sitting around a table that doesn't necessarily look like you as a woman, and I would say even more so a woman of color, those are hard steps to make. So we really need to support each other as we're making them.
Yeah, and those are all things that we heard from some fabulous women in this story who really were great advocates for other women, and I hope you check out the video that we've included in this link. I also want to address some of the comments that we've gotten over the last couple days as we've posted this story. So this was on Twitter. The account Prickles writes, "Stop doing this, just stop." And I think it's a reference to, again, this bias loop, right? The more we ask, are women electable, the more we're almost reinforcing that bias. So I hope this is the last time that LX asks the question, because we got our answer. Is America ready? The answer is yes. What is the hindrance? It's asking the question. It's the media narrative that spins this bias loop.
Right. So then what we have to do is we have to show action. We have to show what we're doing. And again, at Women Creating Change, we're really trying to get everyone at the table, provide education, tools, support, guidance. And then we were talking about women and others supporting each other. We're looking at having women mentor other women through the process so that women who have had the opportunity to sit at those tables can help other women who haven't been at those tables.
Hey, you can always reach NBCLX at NBCLX on all your social media platforms. Women Creating Change, there's their handle there, and I'm Noah Pransky. I want to read you another comment we got here. Ron Wright wrote us on Facebook. He said, "We've had 45 men who have screwed it up one way or another, so I'm all for letting a woman be president of the United States. Way overdue." I mean, look, there's this huge anti-government, feeling across America. Sure, why not? I mean, and I'm not advocating for any individual candidates, but maybe it is time.
What we do know is we need great talent, right? We, again, more than ever, something's broken in Washington, and I don't think any one party or any one person is responsible for it, but we know things need to look very different, and women are over half of the population. We want to make sure they're part of the solution and they're at the table helping to make the decisions about things that, of course, are going to affect them, their families, and those that they care about.
Another interesting thing that came up in the story, both in the scientific polling that we did and also anecdotally, is that women aren't one group, right? Just like white Americans, black Americans, Hispanics don't all act in the same exact way. So the conversation, are all women candidates going to behave the same? Of course not. Did Hillary Clinton lose because she was a female? Look, was sexism part of it? Maybe, but there were so many things that ultimately led to her defeat, we know in hindsight, right? She was defined by so many things. And there was a comment here, Susan Roman wrote, whenever she is the best candidate, this will happen. And I think basically what she's saying is, when we have the right female candidate, we will have a woman president.
Right. It's sort of like what happened with President Obama. I think a lot of people didn't know that the country was ready, but then here comes along Barack Obama, and apparently the country was ready. And I agree with that writer, which is, the right candidate. We want the right candidate. We shouldn't be electing because they're a man or a woman. We should be electing the right person at the right moment in time who can really drive an agenda. I think what we're saying, hopefully, is not, can a woman be elected? Of course they can. We just have to make sure we have the right candidate who's going to serve the most needs of our country.
Here's another comment from Charlotte. Charlotte is a conservative voter in Florida. She says, someone like Golda Meir, not Hillary Clinton. And that kind of speaks to what you just said. It depends on the candidate, right? I mean, I think a lot of people are willing to elect a woman if that woman represents their views.
Right. And I think that's what we're waiting for. And what we also want to make sure is that everyone who gets into that process, that we basically try to democratize it so that everyone, little d, everybody can be a part of the process, so that no gender is left out, no race is left out, nobody of a certain sexual orientation is left out. We want everyone to be part of the process, and I think that makes the conversation that much richer.
When we polled this past week on the the barriers standing in the way of more women, reaching top executive political roles, governor, president, the number one thing we talked about was this feeling that America wasn't ready. But the number two thing was that the parties weren't recruiting enough women. What is going wrong that we don't see enough women entering races? Because the science shows actually the women's success rate are the same as men. Most women who run for president lose, just like most men who run for president lose. And when they run for these other offices, their win rates are pretty much the same.
Right. I think there's a lot of challenges that go into it. Right now, I think politics is a rough business. Like, who wants to take that on? And when we think about women, women are often taking care of their families. They have a lot of things on their plate. Being able to take on that role and responsibility, and you have to start young. You go through this at a time when, people might be thinking about having families, building their career. Just like with men historically have had more flexibility in putting more time into their career, where women have to sort of balance that with also raising the family and all of that. So there's a lot of barriers that go into it. It's also the whole issue about making sure women are prepared, that they have access to tools, that they have access to resources. I mean, one of the candidates, I won't name who, was very publicly here in New York City last night doing a couple of fundraisers. And having access to those dollars and people who will back these candidates, it historically has gone to a small sort of subset of people, sort of this cadre of people who have been in politics for a long time. So being able to open that up, and some of our candidates right now are really priding themselves on taking a lot of money, little money from a lot of people. So there's a lot of different approaches that I think will make it more open and accessible to more types of candidates, women and others.
And it's much like the corporate ladder. A lot of it just takes encouraging those talented women that you might know, whether you're a man or a woman, saying, maybe you should run. go for it. Like, get into the process and try it.
Right, and setting policies, like what California did in terms of getting people on the board. It will be really interesting. We don't want to just wait, but can you imagine 5 or 10 years from now, what have those policies of having women on the boards? We hope they're women who also like to support other women, good women. We don't just support women because they're women. We should support great talent. Half the talent out there is women. Hopefully they'll be supported. So it's a combination of, yes, we do need to support each other, but we also need some policies in place to make sure that happens. Here in New York State, actually next week, the Governor Cuomo, is going to have an event really laying out his women's agenda. He does this every year, and he's been really big on, a variety of things, from addressing issues around domestic violence to addressing issues on equal pay, really important issues that affect women day to day in their everyday lives.
All right, cool. Well, one of the cool things we saw too is that, we talk about this question is antiquated. The good news is, when we broke down the age and the generational splits on this poll, younger voters were much more likely to be open to female candidates, to like their female candidates. And actually, they actually seem to like their male candidates a little bit more too, which was interesting. It's like maybe they're just not jaded by the whole political process yet. But they definitely showed more of a willingness to embrace the female politicians. Another question we asked, and this was like getting really cool into the data of polling, and the video, which is attached to this link, we actually take you behind the scenes of a poll, how the poll questions were created, how we did the polling, and all that stuff too. One of the questions we broke down, we gave half the field, 1,100 people, a fictitious male senator, said this guy is going up against Donald Trump, and then we gave the other 1,100 half a female candidate. Everything was the same except the name. So it was Senator Peter and Senator Susan. How would they do against Donald Trump? And the reason we asked the question that way is we wanted to see if there was this inherent bias between 1,100 people here and 1,100 people there. Would they think that one candidate would perform better against the president than the other? And sure enough, they gave the female fictitious character the same or better marks on every single category we gave. For the most part here, and that included big differences on standing up for his or her policies against the president, appealing to young voters, and working with the media. What can we learn from that? And this isn't like a political question, but what does it tell us that when you do a blind survey, people actually like the fictitious female character politician?
Right. And that might be, again, a little bit about what's happening in the dirtiness of politics right now. And again, it's not one person, but it might be a little bit of a blowback. And building again into stereotypes, people might just be ready for a big change. Just like they went into Obama and then they came into Trump, and now maybe there's some sort of blowback happening, potentially in a good way for women, so I think we'll have to wait and see. The thing I also liked about what you talked about with the young people is their openness to women candidates. I think it gives me hope, because I feel like they don't have a lot of the built-in biases. They're seeing a lot more women candidates than we've ever seen before. So maybe the comfort level is also much more there than it has been before. And even with that recent poll that you did, even seeing so many women candidates out there might have people for the first time realizing, you know what, there are really smart women that could be in this role. In the past, there was like one person that, and certainly Hillary did quite well, but now we're having a lot more candidates. So then people might just, the comfort level might be more strong.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of anti-Hillary Clinton sentiment these days, both from Democrats and Republicans, depending where you are. But the fact is, she did win the popular vote. That's not how we pick a president, but she did clearly come close to half the country supporting her. She was, depending on you count, just tens of thousands of votes on those Rust Belt states from essentially winning the Electoral College as well. So it's clear that we have females who are ready to tip that balance and break the glass ceiling, I guess, and be president. It's just going to take one day the right politician.
Right, and it's been fun actually to see some of the women candidates on the Democratic side just even talking about the fact that it's not an issue for them. clearly there are issues associated with being a women candidate, but there's a lot of confidence that's coming to them right now. And I feel like they should feel good as candidates that there is an opportunity for a candidate on any side of the political spectrum that's a woman to really rise up and do quite well, and we're seeing it now.
Yeah, and I think that goes for kind of everything. Whether you're on the local mosquito board, you're a town councilwoman, you're a Congress member, or you're running for president, you know, this poll shows that America really does like female politicians as a whole. You'll see plenty of negative comments about certain people, but that tends to go more toward the politics than it seems to go toward the gender.
No, and in New York City, our two recent speakers of the New York City Council were women. We happen to have a man right now. He's great. But we've certainly seen leadership roles, and we've seen women run, never get into the mayor's office, but get close. So I think there's some possibility it might just be part of the process. We might be getting there.
Yeah, and the pendulum has swung in American politics for forever. Every 6 to 8 years it goes from one extreme to the other, it seems. The people in the middle are just always disenfranchised and dissatisfied, I guess, but that's American politics.
Right, the moderate, yes, exactly.
The moderate, the poor moderates. I want to circle back up real quickly to the one issue we talked about. We touched on it earlier, but do you believe male candidates or female candidates are better on each of these following issues? This is one of our poll questions. And again, you can check out the whole story and the whole poll at the link attached to this post. There were certain issues like immigration where basically like men and women were dead even. And I think that's is that encouraging? What do you read from that when you have issues that are just dead even? America's like, oh, they're kind of the same.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can take away from it is what it seems like in this poll. Climate was the outlier for me. I didn't really understand why people felt like women were stronger on that. That was kind of an interesting one for me. Otherwise, it really seemed to align much more with traditional gender roles, which is not necessarily a good thing. So with something like immigration, my hope on the positive side would be, look, this is an important issue to men and women, and we think men and women can address this issue equally. That's kind of where I would hope we would be. We wouldn't be split on somebody purely because of their gender. Look, men and women we all have brains, we use them in different ways, but we shouldn't be judging people based upon any characteristic about who they are.
Talk about climate for a minute here. That's basically been politicized to death here. You go to a lot of places in this country and they say that's a democratic progressive issue. Is the sexism gender issue being associated with democratic politics? We really don't have very many women prominent in the Republican Party right now.
Right. No, it's actually really interesting. And where I come out on climate I was surprised because I think about climate as very tied to science. So I would have thought people would think, again, with traditional gender roles, not mine, how I relate, but that they would have associated more with men then. But I think you might be right. It's kind of an interesting one that I think we'll have to. I'd love to see a next poll from you guys really digging deeper into some of this data. Now that we know the answer to yes, women are electable,
and we don't have to ask it again.
We don't have to ask it again. But like, why do people sort of land in these ways on these different topics? It's it's sort of like we don't know why people pull the lever the way that they do when they go into the voting booth, but we could do some digging when they're quietly at home filling out their polls.
Yeah, we've launched this new national poll series every month with our partners at Morning Consult. So next month, we'd love to hear what you want polled. We're totally open to tackling some things that nobody else is tackling, whether it's an undercovered or uncovered issue across the country. That's really what LX is all about. Digging into those things that the mainstream media may not cover, local stories that are relevant nationally, national stories that are relevant locally to your community. And I'm really happy that you could join us today, Carole. We have one comment here I want to read before we let you go. Chelsea wants to know when you're going to run for office.
Oh, thank you, Chelsea. I've worked for a lot of politicians. I want to stay in a place where I feel like I can have impact. So I'm really excited to be the CEO of Women Creating Change. And Chelsea, if you ever want to get involved with us and get other women to become civically engaged, come join us and check us out. But thank you for that little plug.
And that is a female CEO here. We don't have enough of them. We need some more. So continue to support the women in your life and the ones that you work with, whether it's the corporate ladder, the political ladder.